Ooh, that looks tasty. Did you know in the 1800s there was a conflict between the French and the Algerians? I didn't know that. Did you know that the villagers fought back under the leadership of a group of women? I didn't know that either. Did you know that when the villages were taken over by the French, the villagers would switch sides and fight with the French? I didn't know that either. It's a good thing we have this game now, isn't it? Welcome, folks. Today the Hungry Gamer is back with another Kickstarter preview, and today we're talking about The Red Burnoose, Algeria, 1857 by Roberta Taylor and Matt Shoemaker, and published by Hit 'em with the Shoe Games. And on a side note, one, as always, I do apologize if I mispronounce those names, but two, there was a delightful moment when I got a shipping notification that said, "Hit 'em with the shoe has sent you something," because I didn't realize that was the name of the publishing company. So that was awesome, and I love the name. So anyhow, there you go. And before I get started, please make sure you turn on your Klingon subtitles, because if I make any errors in the rules overview, that is where you will find a correction. Additionally, do note that everything you see here is just a prototype and is still subject to change. Now, what Red Burnoose is it is a war game, and in this war game, you and your co-players are taking on the role of the Algerians, the Berbers, who are trying to fend off the French, and this is a cooperative game, though it can also be played solo. And if you are able to survive the onslaught of the French until their AI deck here runs out, you will win the game. Though, unfortunately for me, last time I played, as you can see, I failed, as I was conquered here, and I ran away like the coward that I am down there. And the way you're going to be doing that is through moving armies around the board, chucking some dice, and mostly through deck building. Now, if you are not interested in how this game is played and just want to jump into my final thoughts, then you want to go to the timestamp on the screen right now. For those of us still here, let's talk about what's going to happen in this game. The actual broad gameplay is actually pretty darn simple. The complexity comes in when you start doing the deck building. But let's talk what's going on. So in this game, each player will take control of one of these sets of towns or villages here. You got our blue towns, villages, our greens, and our reds. If you're playing two-player, and I was playing two-handed last time, you simply block off this one right here, and then you divide up this one and this one. And what's going to happen is there will be a total of 3 possible French armies that are going to be going out onto the board. And when the game starts, you don't know where they're going to come from. And as these AI cards here flip out, they're going to be putting different units into these armies at the bottom. And as you put units into it, for example, this one here gives 2 sappers and 1 carabinier, I don't know how you say that, and so I'd put them in there. And it says here, right on here, now this army is actually already deployed onto the board, but it says right here, deploy when 6 or more units are present. So if there's 6 of them present, the first time, I would flip this over, and it would tell me where they are attacking from, which in this case is all the way up here. And you can actually see that's what this army right here is that took me out of the game. But it would go out there, and then it will also tell you down the bottom when they are reduced to X amount of units, in this case 2, the army would retreat, which means you take them off the board and you kind of start over right here. When this one's full, you move on to the next one and the next one, so eventually you'll probably have 3 armies out on the board. Additionally, these cards, when they come out, they're going to tell you where it is that they're going to go. For the most part, these armies are just simply going to advance along the path, but sometimes they have choices. And then when the card comes out, it's going to tell you where it is that you're going to go. And there is a slightly more in-depth chain of choices that you sometimes have to make, but for the most part, that's how it's going to go. And then when it comes time for combat, you're simply going to see what it is that you have. We'll pretend that right there versus whatever it is that the French are bringing with them, which we'll just pretend is that right there. And then you simply are going to start out, you'll do the artillery. If there's any artillery, they get to take their attack first, which in this case, you'll see there is just 1. And so we'll go ahead and do that. There's 1 artillery here and 6. And then I go to my handy dandy card right there. And you can see that on a 6, that will remove 2 units. Then I go down here to the bottom and I look at who gets hurt first. So first, the Mujahideen are hurt. then sharpshooters, then mujahidates are hurt, and leaders are last. So in this case, I would take 2 damage to white unit, so that's 1 there, and then my yellow unit, which is 1 there, which means I've lost my sharpshooter. Then you would move into the sharpshooters would get to go. Well, unfortunately for me, they've been taken out. However, you'll be earning throughout the game reroll tokens. So, you know what? We'll just pretend that I'm going to go ahead and spend a reroll, and that's much better. Now they haven't hurt me, then I get to respond with my guy, which I've rolled a 5, and we'll see that sniper, that's 1 hit. And then I go to their chart, and I find out that I take out cavalry first. Great, they're gone. And then we simply go back and forth with the rest of my units and the rest of their units until either they retreat or I have been wiped out. Now, if I get wiped out the first time, I can run away. Now, there are rules that might not let you run away if you have certain people in the town, but I won't go into that. And then the second time that happens, the game is over. Once 2 villages are conquered, that's it. The game ends, no matter how many players that you have. Now, I went very quickly through the basics of how the combat works, mostly so we could talk about the deck building, because that's where the real core of the game is. Now, the main deck building is just deck building. If you're familiar with that, you know how it works. But we'll talk a little bit about what's going to go on the rest of it. So what's going to happen is, and this is my final deck for my defeat, is you're going to draw 5 cards, and you'll flip them out, hopefully not throw them out like I did. And what you'll see here is on these cards, there are several things. First, you have purchase power. So if I keep this card in my hand at the end of the game, I'll have that to make a purchase. Or it has an option on there. When placed in a village with a mujahidat, gain 1 reroll token. Now, what does that mean, placed in a village? Well, as I mentioned, all the players have different towns that they're controlling. So in this case, that town right there is this. And I would have this in front of me. So I could take this weapons card, and for 1 of my 3 actions, you get 3 actions every turn, I could put that in the town. Done, and it's going to stay there until I take an action to bring it back. I'll talk about that in a minute. And I can put as many things as I want into a village. And then you'll also note that this particular town is wooded, so at the beginning of each combat, I would gain a reroll token, and I also begin the game with 1 market. And as you see, there's different things on each of these cards. Discard to draw 2 cards. And down at the bottom, this is what they actually cost to purchase. And again, if you're familiar with the deck builder, you know what that means. You have to get these things to be able to purchase things. We have the mujahideen, which when you buy them, you actually get to place one on the board. And that's what that symbol is there. It has its own purchase power. When I redraw the card later, if I don't actually use it, I can discard this and a weapon card to do an ambush and. Now, what's important, I think, really about this is the movement of units, because you are able to do a little bit of movement of units with your actions, but again, you only have 3 actions per turn. It does allow you to move your mujahideen and your sharpshooters amongst your villages, but there are some cards you're going to use that's going to allow you to take something and send it to the other player, because for the most part, you are on your own. You don't move around that much. You're not moving forces between your villages and their villages. You're just kind of doing your own thing and communicating with each other to try to battle them off. And then the last thing I said I would mention is when you're putting cards out into the villages, because there is an action that you can take where instead of putting a card into a village, instead of discarding a card for its action, instead of doing a mobilize, moving troops around, you're able to bring all the cards back out of your villages. And so suddenly that's going to turn your hand of 5 cards, maybe, into a hand of 10 cards. And while you still only have 3 actions, what that's going to do is allowing you to put cards in there that you need for combos, or save stuff up so you can make a big purchase, thus kind of mitigating the times when you have a hand that's just trash and you can't do anything with it. But all in all, that's the core of how this game works. And you're going to play until either two villages have been conquered by the French, or until the French AI deck runs out. So, what do I like about this game? First, before I go any further, I have to say, I don't play war games. I just don't. And the reason I usually don't play war games is because there's something about playing real people that makes me feel odd. And Usually that comes down to when we're talking about a World War II game or something like that, where basically I don't want to be the Nazis. Or I don't want to be the Allies and let the Nazis win. I don't like that. Doesn't mean you can't, and doesn't mean I have any judgment on people who do enjoy it, but it's just not for me. So why did I actually take this game? Because this is a war game. And the reason is because I had never heard of it, and the history behind it, and they give a pretty long bit of the history along, at least in the prototype they did, is fascinating. And there's something very impressive and incredible about these women that led this fight back against the French. It's just fascinating to me. And then a war game that's also a deck builder. Again, maybe there are lots of war games that do that, but I've never heard of them. It intrigued me. So jumped in, so I took it. So the first thing is clearly the history behind this, the theme behind this, I find completely fascinating. And yes, it is a little bit abstracted because you are, cubes on a board, but I do think there's some really interesting theme here. And as you get the cards, and most of the cards are generic, but you have your leaders, and your leaders do different things, it's really, really fascinating. So I do like the theme. I like what this game is about. The next thing that I like about the game is, I enjoy deck building in general. It is one of my least favorite Euro mechanics in general, because often you have cards that are just money cards, you're using that to buy things, and I don't like that. But this one, it doesn't really do that. Because all of these different cards that you're using, yes, you're using them to buy other cards, but almost every single one has another thing that you can use it for. And I really do enjoy that. I also really like how you are limited to the 3 actions per turn, because what it does is, sometimes it's easy, but so often you are suddenly feeling that stress and that tension because there are more things that you want to do than you can do, and you have to start prioritizing. To me, that is very, very cool. However, what I think I like the most about it is the way the villages work. And yeah, it's cool, you put things in there and you get bonuses, or things might happen, or it's harder for the French to attack up the hill, or whatever, that's fine. But the storing of cards in the villages, that is what is really cool to me, because you're able to somewhat mitigate that issue that often happens in deck builders where you have a cool combo, but you can't use the combo because you didn't get both cards, and then you're throwing everything away at the end of the round. But you can take them, you can just throw it in there and hold on to it. Or what I found I did a lot was I would wind up and I would just start putting some cards in there and saving purchase power until a turn came along that I didn't have 3 things that I could do for some reason. Then suddenly I'd pull all these cards out and I have all this purchase power, and I would buy the stuff that I really need and really wanted. And to me, that is fantastic. Fantastic. Now, the next thing is, I do appreciate how the combat system works. It's deceptively simple. When you read through it in the book, it's got this kind of long flow chart. This happens, then this happens, this. But really, it's just a matter of you're throwing some d6 and you're checking the friendly little chart here to see how many hits it is. And that's it, you're done. And then it has on there, who gets removed first as things get hit. And it's very quick and it's very easy, and it does seem to keep the game moving and popping. I also like how the AI works, just in the sense that as you're putting out these different armies, they're growing. When they have enough, here they come, they're going to come after you. But I like how it does feel very unpredictable to me. I was never able to predict accurately what was going to happen next. And that to me is really good for this kind of game. You should not know. And the last game I played, it was simply, well, what's the worst thing that could possibly happen? Well, that's what's going to happen. And it just kept kind of going on and on and going that way. But the point is, it is an easy AI to operate, and it does keep you guessing. It does, again, keep that tension high. And then the last thing that I particularly like is the various leaders that you can have. They all are very different, and they do very different things. And while it doesn't change your whole play style, it certainly does change the play style early in the game, which I think is very interesting. So, what are my quibbles with the game? And the first one is, even though there is some mitigation, I did find there were definitely times where I still couldn't do anything. I just would not draw what I needed. And if as the deck gets larger and larger by the end of the game, if for the dumb luck of the shuffle,
all of your food cards wind up bunched up somewhere, you're out of luck for a while if you're trying to get new units out there. And that can happen. Now, it might just be a reflection that I'm bad at games, but I did notice that happened once or twice as I was going through. The next thing is, even though it does say that if a player is eliminated, they take over the AI, and then if another player is eliminated, the game's over, you've lost, you can be knocked out of the game like that. Really, really fast. It's possible if the next quibble, the dice just don't go your way. Because even though there's lots of rerolls that you can get, it's pretty easy to get rerolls, it is a dice game. And it is, well, it's random, it's dice. And I know a lot of people sometimes don't like that. They don't like that they could hit something with overwhelming force and then wind up still losing or whatever it may be. And that can happen. And so it is possible to have those turns where, one, you get the cards, you just can't do anything that you want, but you send your army out anyway, or your army's defending, and you roll these dice, you use your rerolls, and you just do nothing, and you get smashed, and then you have lost a village, and you're out of the game. That can happen pretty darn quick. And while I don't think it would happen often, especially because you have the retreat ability, it can. And to me, that is something that is just worth knowing. And then my last quibble with the game is I wish there was a little more variety in the cards that are in the market. There's only 8 different things. And is it enough to play through the game and keep it tense and interesting? Absolutely. But I do wonder if I play this game 10, 15 times, I'm going to feel the lack of other things. And maybe there will be mini expansions or something that can go into this, but to have some other options in that market, and even if you only have 8 every game, but to have some others that you could put in there, like is common in a lot of deck builders, could really amp up the replay value. Because I can see this being a game that people really like, but then you get tired of playing it because it becomes kind of samey as you go through. And so I do wish that there was a few more cards in there, a few more options that you could mix in. Though, not ones that are just money. None of those. Don't like those. But more cards that do different things. Maybe it does something different when it goes into a village, or maybe it does something different when you discard, or whatever it is. More of those, I think, would really make this game pop. But there you have it, folks. If I made any mistakes in the rules overview, please let me know in the comments with a timestamp so I can get that into the Klingon subtitles. As always, if you found this video useful, please like, subscribe, and share. Thank you so much for watching. Have a wonderful, wonderful day.